listening to Carpool Theology. Join Alex, Shanah, and Grace, that's me, as we hit the road to discover who we are in light of who God is. Along the way, we'll be joined by friends, authors, and community leaders to discuss the intersection of faith and action and have a ton of fun while doing it. So grab a coffee, jump in the car with us, and let's roll.
Hello.
And welcome to Carpool Theology.
Oh my gosh, it feels so great to have our third.
Oh,
The
things
harmony.
just took a turn, Grace. That is a different kind of intro music.
Hey,
The harmony is much better.
just a Tuesday.
Somebody was out of town all weekend.
Anyways, I'm Grace.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Shanah.
Woo! What's up? It's not a Friday.
It's
No.
not.
I feel like my role is to address the day. It is a Tuesday at approximately 4 in the afternoon.
The weather outside.
Yay, we're in the car.
Yeah.
All
Yes.
together.
The
gang's
band's back. Yeah.
Yeah, depending on when you hear this, which it might be like reverse time
Osmosis.
frame. Yes.
It's podcast world. Time
in
doesn't
podcast
exist.
world. Alex and I went out of town. Shanah could not come with us, unfortunately. So you'll hear a couple episodes maybe coming up that Shauna's not with us, and we'll address it. We're very sad about it,
And neither is the disco ball.
and neither was the disco ball. But Shanah, you're back.
I'm back. I really want to sing that AC/DC song right now.
Oh.
That's it.
We're happy to be with you.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm happy that you guys are back. I felt really bad that I double booked myself. I had a lovely time, but I did miss being with you guys. But I'm excited to hear the episodes that you guys recorded.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's really, really good content. And,
Yeah. Our ongoing bit is that we had a horrible time.
yeah.
We did.
Yeah, it was horrid.
Yeah.
Gross ramen.
Yeah, gross. Nothing friendship. We didn't even talk really
Yeah.
outside the podcast.
You know,
Alex and I
the
just-
only thing that is worse than the lie that you're telling is the convincing that you have of me. I believe you so not
so bad.
at all.
It was so bad. Oh man. Did you guys know this is like my little pop culture moment? I just gotta throw it in there.
Oh,
Did you guys know
let's
that the
do it.
Met Gala was last night?
Yes.
I'm just not into that. I don't. I'm annoyed.
It's
You're annoyed?
so
It's
much.
just like get off the tubes. Like everyone's on
Dang.
the screen.
Dang, hot take.
It's like extra.
Don't you
like
go down more?
you can go. It all roads lead to where you're going.
All roads lead to coffee.
Just right at some point.
Okay, so the Met Gala. What was your
Met Gala.
hot take?
I'm just saying, it's all about the fashion, right? The costumes, what's happening. I just need to address the very awkward ridiculousness that was Doja Cat. Anyone?
No.
Oh my gosh, you guys.
So
She's dressed up like a cat.
Oh.
She has some type of like Grinch, like, what's it called? Like when they do.
No, like the
Yes.
whisker thing?
Yes, but it's been like, legitimately, like professionally put on her face so that she has a snout
I'm out.
and a nose and whiskers. And
I'm
her,
out.
like, the nails that she got done were like claws. And she's getting interviewed by Vogue, like,
turn right, Johnny.
for the Met Gala. And they're like, how's your night? And she's just meowing at them. It was
Shut
one of
up.
those-
Shut
I'm
up.
not joking. She did not answer a question.
Oh no.
She did not speak English. She spoke cat.
She
Oh,
spoke
gosh.
cat. She spoke cat.
She just meowed.
She just
I would have been
meowed.
fine until the meowing.
And this poor gal who's interviewing her just has to go along with the bit because what else can you do?
You know, she was like, I'm gonna interview freaking Doja Cat, and it's
Yeah.
gonna be amazing.
I'm so
No,
excited.
sorry, no.
No, not a singular answer from her. Like, what are you wearing?
Meow. Oh, stop. Turn left, Johnny.
Not. It's real. Anyways, I just needed to address that in the car.
I saw something saying someone brought Chick-fil-A or something and they got in trouble. I mean, this is the
Too
stuff
many
where-
haters on Chick-fil-A.
This is the stuff we're observing.
Oh man.
I love me some Chick-fil-A.
Well, after that great turn of events there, chatting about Met Gala,
Yeah.
we have a fun guest in the car today.
Yes, we
do.
do. We have Mr. Andrew Feil, hailing from originally Bakersfield.
I'm a Bakersfield boy.
Over here.
Bakersfield boy.
Right,
Bakersfield
right,
boy,
Grace?
the Fresno
669,
world.
what up?
Yeah, 661.
Wow,
Oh
that's
the
my
best.
gosh.
All
Yep.
good things come from Bakersfield.
That's right. Half of this car is Bako right now,
Yeah,
so come on, don't hate.
We don't live there anymore, but you know.
I liked it. I into it.
Oh, Alex, let's be honest, okay? Like, let's call it a spade. You love Cafe Smitten.
I
Bakersfield
like
just happens to be in the.
Okay, let's call my thing. I actually truly enjoyed the culinary beverage experience that was downtown Bakersfield.
Yes, and we got our tattoos in Bakersfield.
Actually,
so
their
we're.
Oh,
downtown
wow.
is more popular than ours. I just said
it is.
Oh,
It is.
you're not wrong
No, it's
about
not
that.
wrong.
They
You're
have
not wrong.
much better culinary
We did go to dinner after 6 p.m.
experiences.
We did.
That are all walking distance.
We
I could
did.
walk and get a drink, get a little food, whatever, get a tattoo. You know, maybe
Yeah.
it happened maybe today.
Everything
I
we
don't know.
need. Everything we need. Coffee,
I don't know.
Oh.
delicious food and beverages.
Any hoozles. Andrew Feil, welcome to the car.
Welcome.
I'm really glad to be here. I've been
Spicy.
a fan, been part of the journey of hearing this come into fruition, and excited for really excited for what you all are doing. So
Oh, thank you. Well, when we were talking about this Peacemaking series, your name was one of the first on our hearts and minds. You've been doing this work a long time, professionally and personally. So yeah, we're excited that you agreed to be in the car
of
and
course.
roam around downtown with us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Andrew, tell us a little bit about who you are, your family, and what you do.
Yeah, so I am originally from Bakersfield. Came to Fresno to go to college, and when I was there, I got connected to a church, the Well Community Church. So I was on staff for 8 years. I oversaw local mission, global mission, life groups, a campus. Changed a lot of different roles, and I have a family of 4 boys. So we are 11 to 4 in ages. A lot of fun. And my wife Denise was a teacher and is now like a garden instructor. So, and then I've been, from the church world, I moved over to Every Neighborhood Partnership, and that was a local nonprofit that was launched out of a church, really to help churches, college students, businesses get connected in our city and find easy on-ramps to serve and to be a part of the transformation God is doing in our community. So I've been there for about 7.5 years and executive director for the last 3.
Yeah.
And I'm actually Grace's boss.
Let's address it. Andrew
So-
is my boss. We
Yeah.
work together. It's great. I love it.
I didn't realize, I thought you founded the partnership. I did not know you were not that.
When I started at the Well, EMP had just started.
Okay.
So I actually have worked alongside EMP for that whole time.
Cool.
And as a church, I supported the director and, we had a partnership. So, but yeah,
Well, it's probably all your passion. It's like
Yes.
that's really,
it's a line.
that's hard to
Yeah.
find too when you're find someone that loves it so much that you can't really tell the difference between
Yeah, that's true.
ownership and,
Yeah.
So what would you say if you had to boil down, like, elevator pitch what EMP exists to do? How would you present that?
Oh man, I feel like with Grace in the car, I'm in trouble if I don't do this well.
Keep it
This
tight.
is all, and this is like 80% of what Andrew and I talk about. So this is good.
Oh.
This is gonna break what we're necessarily talking about. But what I imagine is I want to see every kid have a mentor and the supports they need to thrive. I want every member of our community to know that they can make a difference, and every church have the opportunity to serve our city. So that's the big picture, what I hope for that our work inspires and does. I also, really think it's about the leadership development. Like, we're developing leaders, like Fresno depends on it. And so we want to see our kids in our elementary schools become leaders. We want to see our college students who we work with realize their potential and become the type of leader that gives back to their cities. And we want to see our churches really develop the next generation of Christians that understand their call to serve our city and be part of the transformation. So it's a lot of leadership development. We do, our mission statement is to activate, equip, mobilize, and transform. And so a lot of that is, service experience, learning opportunities, and, hoping that in that people get a view of what what they can be a part of and what the new future of Fresno looks like.
Amazing.
Yeah, I love that so much. Obviously, I'm so stoked on that. But you shared a little bit about like your church background and your employment background, but give us maybe a deeper view of your faith journey. Like, how did you go from, Bakersfield, working for a church, to realizing like, how has your faith journey brought you to a place where like peacemaking is like part of what you do and who you are?
Yeah, totally. It's been a journey, and I think like I love the journey metaphor because I think it's so apt for the scriptural narrative, right? Like the people of God have always been on a journey. And I think for a lot of us, like it we have different ways we experience God in different seasons, and who God is always a new process of discovering and figuring out what is God speaking to us. I come from Bakersfield, which was a conservative Baptist kind of environment. And I got plugged in here as I moved to Fresno, and Fresno for me was that first experience away from my parents' faith to say, is this my own? Do I choose this, or is this something I'm going to be a disciple of Christ, or am I leaving this behind? And so I really had some clear moments of discipleship where I felt like God saying, I want you to pour into others and invest in others to help Christians take their next step of faith journey. Like that's kind of been a vision of my life, like help Christians take their next steps of faith. But did that in different spaces. So I moved over to the church world. I actually kind of like didn't like pastors and didn't really trust pastors. It just kind of seemed like, why, like, how's that a job? And like, what do these people do? And so me working at a church was a total surprise. I had my teacher credential to teach high school history and did that for a year before going to the well. And
it'd be a really good 2 truths and a lie for you.
Yeah.
I would never put you in a classroom.
Yeah, high school history.
It's great.
Econ, yeah.
I'm gonna kill it that way.
I'll add that in. Yeah, and I think for me, that journey, it really started, I got connected to a group of folks in Fresno who are committed to peacemaking. That's really the story is, I know Shanah and Grace, you talked about your journey on the podcast of going to Mississippi. Mississippi and John Perkins has had a huge radical impact on Fresno.
Right. So
I started hanging out with this group of Christians here in Fresno who had hung out with John and really understood this idea, this call to peacemaking for the city, of justice, of what, Christian community development. And so that group of people radically changed my worldview and shifted, I think, kind of the trajectory of my life, honestly. I went to this conference, the Christian Community Development Conference, and just was like, oh, this is my people. Like, I'd had some missions experiences, global missions experiences, where you come in, you give some backpacks, play a song, share the gospel, and you leave. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't like this. This does not feel like transformation. But I didn't have language for why. And so that world really changed my worldview.
So to back up a little bit, when you were trying to figure out like, okay, is this my faith, or this is the faith of my parents, and what does that look like for me? What sticks out to me as a question is like, you're so passionate about like people having mentors, like kids having mentors, but I think just people, to like really like flesh out like, what does your leadership look like in your life? So were there mentors along the way, and how did they push against you? What was helpful? What was not? What can we learn from that?
That's a good question. I think when I was like high school or, even college, you don't realize what you have, right? Like I look back on my life and I go like, oh, my high school leaders were 2 40-year-old dudes, both single actually. And they just invested in this group of junior, senior boys. And like, I remember like, we just did ridiculous stuff. We'd play, like, we called it bloody pony football. Like we'd play indoor tackle football with a pony, stuffed animal, and then do a Bible study.
Thank you for clarifying it was a stuffed animal pony.
Stuffed animal,
I'm thinking, was it a pony? Did somebody have a ponytail?
Yeah, no.
Youth group.
Yeah, it's
early,
youth group.
Yeah, late 90s,
yeah,
early
2000s. Little Sebastian from Parks and Rec.
That would be, that's an image right there. But like these 2 dudes just like poured into our life. And looking back, I'm like, oh, Jim and Herb had a really important moment to see like, this is what a man looks like. This is a man that's following Jesus looks like. And these guys would radically like challenge and push us. I mean, even we did senior trip where they prayed over us and kind of commissioned us. So you just look at the back of those moments. I didn't see it then, right? I just I go to church on Wednesday. That's all I do. And then when I got to FPU, Dave Albold was, some folks may know him, may not. But Dave Albold was my boss.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop your very important thought.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you want me to order for you, Andrew?
Sure.
Or do you know what you want?
Wow.
I turned him on to this cool thing. Hi.
But really then also like, Dave at the time, he was married. I think he had 2 kids right when we met him. And just watching a guy figure out his marriage, figure out how to raise kids. Like I got to be in their home, like they were going through not an easy time in their marriage. And, he had levels of disclosure that were appropriate for the time, but really just, challenging and pushing me to also lead well. Because I think there's a tendency for me to, challenge authority above me, which then also caused my guys in my dorm to hate the authority of the institution. So I just really learned a lot of leadership, a lot of coaching, learned to be more teachable. And then really like how does the pursuit of Jesus be a radical call versus just like, I don't know, sometimes I think Christianese, like male Christianity, it either gets really testosterone driven or it's very soft. And so I think Dave was always a really good guide in between those 2 lines, that, we're now good friends and have still stayed in touch. But I think you have those mentors who you look back and go, oh, that was really pivotal. And he was one of those guys.
So, something that we hope to ask each guest in this series, so we can get just like a kind of general overview of what each person thinks about this. Could you personally define peacemaking for us, as it applies to your life, your ministry, what you do personally, professionally?
Yeah, I got this definition from, so when I think of peacemaking, I think of peace. And that biblical Hebrew word, right, is shalom. And it's not, the English just doesn't do it justice, because I think in peace and peacemaking, it's such a passive word, I think often, at least how I hear it or feel it. And shalom really is this like really holistic idea of that the way things ought to be for people, between people, and in people. So the way things ought to be for people, between people, and in people.
I love that.
And so I think that's like, the definition of peacemaking is so expansive that like everything in our community should work for people, like our city government, our streets, right? Like the systems of our education, like that's the they should work for people. That in between people, like we actually learn how to fight through conflict and be relationally connected to one another. We shouldn't be disconnected across our city, politics, interpersonal tensions, and that even we learn to integrate ourselves, that like we know who we are, we know our identity, we know our worth and our value, like all like mental health, issues, like everything's working in us. And so I think that's the vision of peacemaking that is expansive, that, really is the Hebrew vision and definition, that like, is active. And, MLK has a quote of just like, peacemaking is like an active resistance, and it's an active pursuit that it actually takes really strong people. It's not a passive thing. So yeah, I think that would be, long story short, my vision.
That's great. I love the different aspects of that. Yeah.
I think that requires, though, to like truly believe that definition, is that when I read the Bible, it's not just for me. And so maybe like break that open for us a little bit. Like how does your theology move towards like the communal and like the community, as opposed to yourself, and reading like scripture always through the lens of like, what do I get out of this, as opposed to like, what does this mean for us?
Yeah. That's really good. Well, and I think it goes back to what's the gospel. The gospel has been watered down to be a set of propositional truths we believe. So if I believe this statement, this thing about Jesus, this thing about the Bible, this thing about the Holy Spirit, that's the gospel. Like when Jesus comes on the scene, he says, believe the good news, the good news of what God is doing now. And so the story arc of Scripture is really we have to ask the question, like, what is God doing? What is he up to? And how do I join that? And I think, there's a version of Christianity that really stops at salvation. Like the goal of the church is to see people saved, and really like this world's gonna kind of burn, and we're just trying to get people out while we can. That is a real present version of Christianity that exists in our community.
Yes.
And then there's a version that is like God is about the restoration of all things, and we get to join that. We don't see that final work until heaven. Like when heaven comes here on earth, we get to see the restoration of all things. But until that day, we work to see. We are active peacemakers by working to see that transformation happen now. And so we get to be a part of the reconciliation of all things today that God is already doing. He's on the move, right? And we get to join that work. And so I think the gospel vision of what is God up to and what is the real gospel is more expansive than just hell insurance or I want to see people come to know the Lord. And also I want to see our schools work for, like only 25% of our kids in our schools know how to read. Things ain't working. We got work to do to see the gospel and the holistic vision of transformation happen now. So
That's so great.
All right. So in Mississippi, when we were going to the different museums and things like that, we saw how the propaganda that was, especially in that time, that is not to say that it is not still going on, because it obviously is, but it was much more about like the individual first, group second, or not at all. And what you're talking about is that the gospel actually calls us to have more of a group societal mindset over the individual. And we see that throughout Scripture. And I guess, where did those two things come together for you? What was that process like for you, where you're like, okay, I'm having an individual mindset. How do I swap that? Without sort of like, for lack of a better term, like sacrificing on the altar of like the betterment, but
Yeah, no, totally. I'm with you. And I think, it actually started with the global perspective, because I think that's the gift that exposure trips offer people, is they shift your worldview and help you realize, hey, you're a Western materialist individualist. You have a frame on the world that is very different than most of the world. And most of the world does not think in an individualistic worldview, right? And so I think being in Africa, being in Asia, and just the communal nature of the way folks live, they put the community over themselves. And as a Western person, I look at that and judge it. And then there's also, then I read the scriptures and I realize, these are actually written from a really community-minded and group identity type people. Hebrew people thought about the collective over the individual. And so the scriptures are repeat with it. The prophets are repeat with it, right? They call out cities. They call out people groups. They don't call out, rarely do they ever call it an individual. And if they do, it's typically the leader of power. And so I think even reading the Bible, so as I came back and got connected here locally, I started hanging out with Latin Christians, Black Christians, and realized, hey, why has the Black church in Fresno, why do all the pastors of the Black churches in Fresno speak on issues of education, of housing, of city policies? Like, why do they go to city council meetings? Because they see themselves as connected to the community, and their flourishing, their church's flourishing, is directly connected to the community outcomes. And so that's just a different lens and a different culture than I grew up with. So I think it's been a response to global Christianity, and here local is just recognizing like, I think I really do have something to learn from the global church. I really have something to learn from folks that are different than us. We're driving by Matt from Martin Park, one of the staff of the local nonprofit.
So cool.
Sweet.
That was really great.
I want to press in a little bit more, because we're talking a lot about like, okay, Andrew's like personal journey through that. But you've been doing this work for a long time, Andrew. You've been around the church now a long time. Both like intentionally putting yourself in communities like you're talking about, surrounding yourself around people that aren't like you, but also still like come from like your white framework and your community. What do you think is required of Western evangelicals to ultimately be about like if Fresno, like in Fresno as it is in heaven? What's the requirement there? What's that going to cost us? What's the sacrifice?
Yeah, man. I think there is a sacrifice, and then like I also look at where I'm at now in my life, and it's such a gift. Like it's not a sacrifice I don't want to bear, because I think for me it does come with being in very uncomfortable spaces. So being at churches, being in meetings, some of my early conversations in this work, I'm just around like, I don't know how to talk about race. Like no one in my family prepared me for that. And so I feel attacked. I feel very uncomfortable. I feel like I'm a bad guy because I'm a white, male, hetero, Christian, you know, I'm the top of the pyramid of what can be seen as wrong or something. And so it really, it requires, I think, some level of humility in terms of like, I don't have the answer. And I'm willing to go into new places. And then I think like there's for me just also like I need to learn from those before me, and I also don't get to always make the decision and have my voice like lead the conversation. So you kind of have to step back a little bit in the conversation. So yeah, I think that's what it's been for me personally. I think, you know, what does the church need to do? That's a very different conversation. I think I concern myself with what can I control and what's my work to do in this.
So what does that look like when you're in a situation and you're like, and everything in you, because you're a natural leader, like that's obvious at all the different roles that you've played. When you're a natural leader and you're in a situation and you're like, I have something to contribute, but I recognize I have the most privilege in this room. What does it feel like to take a step back and to nudge the woman of color next to you to like, hey, say your thing?
Before you answer, I just want to encourage him publicly that you're very good at this. So go ahead.
I think a lot of it for me has come with one-on-ones. Like honestly, I think my relational ability in larger spaces has come from I know people and they know my heart. There are communities I walk into that I am despised, like because of who I am, because of who I look like. So not in every space do I walk in and people value my voice or my leadership. So that's for sure like a reality. I think, you know, I sit in spaces where I'm misunderstood by conservative folks for being an activist or some flaming liberal. I'm not. And then I'm in liberal spaces and people are like, you are the most conservative guy I really know. And so it's a hard space to be in, but I think I try and do a lot of one-on-ones to gain people's story and context, so that when we're in a social space, I have the ability to push in. I have the ability to challenge or to nudge, because if I don't know them, that's not sometimes like the fairest thing to do, right? Like, yeah. So I think a lot of the trust comes from one-on-ones, and then when I have the place to say, hey, what do you all think, or what do you think? And just wait on an answer. And if there is no answer, maybe I don't share. So yeah, it is really hard where I think like this meeting's going bad, or I don't think we're going in the right direction. But to be quiet and still is really hard.
Yeah. Well, that leads us into like our next topic, just the asset-based community development, which is what you guys focus on a lot at EMP, correct?
Yeah.
And so like what I'm hearing, obviously I have literally like very limited to no interaction with you in your life, so I'm learning so much about you, and it's so great. But what I really hear is just you clearly embody this concept that everybody is an asset to our community, and everyone actually has like a calling to to share their asset to better our community. So can you explain that a little bit more, and also just maybe, I don't know, throw it out an example, something you learned in Mississippi? If not, just kind of give our listeners an idea of what that really looks like.
Yeah, totally. No, yeah, that's good. I think, so asset-based community development is a framework, right? It's a way of going about community development. And for the Christian lens, I would add, like, to me, it really connects into this idea of the Imago Dei, the image of God. Every person, right? Genesis, as God speaks people into creation, he gives them authority, and he says, you are made in my image. Go and create in this world, and create beauty, create art, create products, right? Like, we're called to each person has that inherent, like, image of God in them.
Yeah.
And so that vision is the starting framework for asset-based community development. Every person has an asset. If we go into our neighborhoods, especially our neighborhoods of poverty, and we say, you know what's wrong? Like, it's dirty here. These people don't care. Blah, blah, blah. Like, we do that. Mm-hmm. We go in and we say what's wrong about a neighborhood. What does the neighborhood have to build on? Nothing, right? Mm-hmm. It needs outside sources. Instead of looking at a neighborhood and saying, what are the assets of this community? Like, what are the relational assets, the land assets, the institutional assets? And when you start with that, you actually have something to, like, it's kind of like the ingredients in a pot. You actually have something to create a meal out of. Versus, hey, we don't have this in the grocery store, we don't have this in our cabinet, right? And so we've seen that framework just be really transformative, because our neighborhoods that are in poverty, Fresno has, like, we're number 2 in the nation in concentrated poverty.
Yes.
Meaning, like, we have the most neighborhoods where 40% or more of folks in those neighborhoods live in poverty. And so these are neighborhoods where people, you want to say, lift yourself up by your bootstraps. That ain't happening. Like, people don't have the like, same opportunities that right. neighbors in North Fresno or Clovis do have.
Yeah.
So as we go into neighborhoods,
and when we say opportunities, we're talking trees,
yes,
grocery stores,
great, like, teaching.
Yes, you know? Like, we're not talking like Los Angeles hip hop dance classes. Yes. That's not what we're talking about. Right. We're talking about very simple basics, resources that we take advantage of.
Yeah. And I think too that just to, like, clarify too, like, you're not only, like, going into, like, these areas and saying what resources do you have here, but you're also, like, people are the resources. Like, you are training up the people that live in the areas whose kids are going to those schools. You're empowering those parents, and it's like, oh no, you can be at this school board meeting. Yes. Oh, you don't speak English? There's actually a program where you can get it in Spanish or in your native language. And here's how you access those things. Yeah. So not only are you making a meal, you're using local ingredients.
Yeah. And I think, like, I've seen the beauty of, like, the, you know, like, the creativity, the gifts that exist, and then even realizing and really processing for myself, if I was born into one of these neighborhoods, I would have the same, like, poor options. I would be making some of the same decisions, because that's all that is before me. I've been blessed to, you know, grow up in the home and the area of town, like, that I did, but, like, that's not everybody's, you know, gift that they got. And so how do we really help people find what they are good at, what they're passionate about, what they're skilled at? So a lot of the journey for us has been helping people to discover that, giving them the tools so they can make the change they want to make. And we want to see everybody have that same opportunity to succeed. And so typically it's just a lack of our investment. And we often, like, don't actually believe these kids are capable. We don't believe that their parents care about them, right? So we have this really negative perception that we just want to reframe and say, no, these parents, they love their kids so much. They have 2 to 3 jobs to provide for them. Yes, they're not able to be there at their parent-teacher meeting. It's not that they don't care. They really do care. And so how do we, like, just continue to do that? And I think, again, from the Christian worldview, it's for me the hopeful redemption of what God wants to do. We use Isaiah 65, where the prophets talking about the new creation, and the prophets envisioning this day where everybody lives a full life, where a kid is born and does not die as a baby, So we don't have preterm birth and death in Fresno, where an adult lives its full years. Somebody gets to plant a tree and to live under it, right? And so we want that like day of like flourishing to happen in our community. And we know it will not start from saying, what do we not have? It starts with what do we do have. And going back to Mississippi, I mean, that's the whole framework that John Perkins has been all about, is that we need to get everybody together, know what they're good at, work together as a community for the flourishing of all.
Right.
And so those that have wealth, they bring connections,
Yes.
they bring resources, but we have to put them in partnership with the poor, where the poor also become the teachers to the wealthy. That they begin to teach the rich how to do actual community and have real friends and not have a schedule and no agenda. Like build deep roots in a place and not move from place to place to place. Like the poor actually could teach you a lot, and if we're not teachable, we actually don't believe in the assets of our community.
Oof.
There's so many people,
Whew.
people and things I'm thinking about right now, and just I just want to make sure like people feel encouraged to and walk away listening with just like not action steps. I guess I mean, I don't know. I'm literally like just off the cuff. I can think of people in my life, immediate people, I want to say, that really are embedded in a concept that the poor are there because of their choices.
Yes,
And
totally.
you work hard enough, you're gonna get X, Y, and Z, and it clearly like their mom and dad put them in a certain situation, and so they feel like they don't have obligation. And I just want to like share, like I just feel like as we're processing this peacemaking series, like regardless of whatever belief you quote unquote you've inherited maybe from your generational lessons in life, that like as a peacemaker, called to be a peacemaker, like none of that actually matters, whether you believe it or not. But it is our call to love our neighbor, and what does that actually look like? And I just love that. Like
I think too that proximity though will change your mind.
Yes.
Like
That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say like the assumptions you have of the poor only work when you're disconnected from them, and then when you actually get up close and you see, the decisions and the system under it. It actually faces the mirror in reality. And so I think that's what's been transformative of not only to be, I work with pastors and city leaders, but I'm like in relationship with some folks and I watch their journey. I participate. One of the things I do is I love doing this is I teach something called Faith and Finances. And it's a low income, Jesus-centered financial literacy class, and for the poor. And so sitting with people who like to save $50 would be a tremendous goal. I sat with a mom who's in a domestic violence situation. She's trying to save $50. We laid out all the things that are going on in her life, all of the stuff. There's a sliver, right? There's 10, 20%. That's some bad choices. But the system around her has set her up to fail. And she's trapped in some really awful cycles that are of none of her choosing. And so that like close contact kind of destroys your like preconceptions of like, hey, just make a better choice.
Yeah, and I think what I'm trying to say is like, regardless, that actually doesn't matter how you respond and what you're called to do. And so it's like, like maybe all of it, maybe 90% of it was her bad choices, or 100% of it was. It doesn't change your role in her life, or it shouldn't. Like, we're called to love and care and to make peace, and this is a big way that you can. And so like there's not stipulations in scripture like, if Susan picks a bad man, then you are not called, like you're not a duty to help her. Like, I don't know, it's just
well, and I think that helping can look in a lot of different ways. There's like a famous book, When Helping Hurts.
Yes.
And like, I'm sure way familiar with that.
The faith and finance curriculum is written by the Chalmers folks who are
Okay.
helping her.
So talk to us about like that difference. Like, why not just come in, write a check to EMP, and call it a day?
Yeah.
I mean, not that you're averse to checks.
Oh, I will take
Please
your
bring
money.
Andrew all
I
the
will take
checks.
your money every day.
But also,
It's about, okay, what often happens, and what When Helping Hurts is really framed around, is what we often think is the solution to people's poverty is material.
yes.
And so if they had money, they had the right, all these things, that would solve poverty. So we give people food, clothing, checks, and it doesn't solve poverty, because poverty is not just material, it's relational.
Well, because once we write the check and we don't see change, then we're like, see, they're just bad at managing finance.
Yes. And once we give money over and over, people become dependent.
Yes.
And then we don't like that relationship, right? So we're not actually solving the root issue of people's poverty. And so
it's about empowerment.
it's about empowerment. And that is long. That is 5, 10, 20 years. That's development. And so we don't have the patience. Like, I think a lot of it is like, love requires sacrifice, and I just don't. I'd rather do a one-day service project. I'd rather just like have one conversation. I'd rather give one check, and then I'm done. And like, that is not gonna actually solve poverty in somebody's life, right?
Yeah. It reminds me of like when someone's in an abusive or oppressive relationship. I think the statistics are they leave an average of 9 times before they're able to leave the relationship entirely, and it's a similar dynamic of like giving the oppressed person
Just saying,
their voice
leave.
back. Yeah, why don't you just leave, or why don't you just say like, here's a boundary, don't cross it, bucko. And you're like, it's actually way more about like you regaining your voice and knowing that like you have this power over yourself. Same thing with like that I'm hearing in this like poverty. There's kind of like a little bit of a plumb line of like no, like you're actually able to do these things. These things are within your power, and these things are available to you. So let's bring those two together.
Yeah. I think that for a lot of our listeners, it would be really most live in Fresno. Shout out. Hi, our Fresno friends. I think it's easy to drive anywhere all over Fresno, or specifically, south of Herndon, and feel like this is overwhelming. I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
I know I'm a Christian. I know I'm called to serve. I know I'm called to be about X, Y, and Z, but I don't know where to even begin. What would be your encouragement to people who are following Jesus, who know that they're called to be about peacemaking and being about how the world ought to be as Jesus intended it? What would be your encouragement?
Yeah, I really love Jamar Tisby, who's written on race issues. He has a really good framework I love called ARC: awareness, relationship, and commitment. And I think it applies here, where there's got to be an awareness raising, right? Like, read the newspaper, sign up for the Fresno Bee, and commit to learning about the issues of our city. Commit to praying about the issues of our city. What you start to pray for will affect your affections, right? We know this. And so start to pray the scripture over our city and what God would do and how he could heal, and pray for our families, our kids, our elected officials, right? Like, actually raise the awareness of what is going on, because I often think we just kind of consume our city, not invest ourselves in it. EMP has some tools for you to learn. We have a drive tour. So if you want to take our drive tour, it's online. You and your life group or family could do it at any time. And it drives you around our city and gives you like signs of hope and signs of pain. And so you get to experience Southwest, Southeast, areas that sometimes folks don't go in. So I think awareness is a big piece. So raise your awareness. 2, begin to build new relationships. I think one that could just be your literal practice being a good neighbor where you're at. Like, just physically get to know the people that live behind you, next to you, on both sides, and in front of you. Like, get
Even
to know
the
those
ones with the annoying dog.
and the very annoying dog that you want to spray. Get to know, like, start being a good neighbor, right?
Yeah.
Like, we as Christians decontextualize love your neighbor and make it somebody, else instead of like our literal next door neighbor. So love your next door neighbors, and then build relationships across our city. For me, that's been the most transformative things. When I sit in communities where it's like, I feel so privileged to hear these things. And a lot of it's pain, some of it's so much hope. I just feel really privileged to be around people that are different than me, that have different passions, giftings, and skills, that are doing amazing work. So build some new relationships. That takes some work. And then make some commitments. Like, what's the thing that you can do? I think sometimes we just make city service like so big that it feels overwhelming.
Right.
It's like, what's the one thing you want to commit to this year, and give yourself to? And I think there's a lot of like try and fail. Like, even though I run an organization that does a lot of work with kids, I did not like going into the classroom and reading with kids. Not my thing. I love doing financial literacy classes. Like, that gives me life, and that's the way I'm going to serve. So find your thing, like serve, try some stuff, and just make some simple commitments to like reorient your life for others and for our city.
So
good.
We have 2 fun, silly questions.
Oh, you know me. Fun,
I know.
silly.
You're
Silly,
so
those
funny.
are your
Fun and
middle
silly.
names.
You're so funny and silly.
Oh my gosh.
This one's a punny. What is fueling your tank right now?
What is fueling my tank? I'm a dad of 4 boys, as I mentioned, and so last night, 3 of my 4, we were all playing catch. So I was throwing the ball to each of them, and we had some neighbors over, had a big soccer game. So I think these moments of like, I'm free, I am not having an agenda, I'm just present to play with my kids is like something I'm really trying to lean into. People that know me, and you can tell on this podcast, I'm pretty task oriented and mission driven. And so to just be and to be present is sometimes a stretch. And so I'm really like, if my kids ask me to do something, I'm leaning into my default answer needs to be yes, unless I have a really good answer. So I've just had a lot of fun playing. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And
Yeah, what can you not leave home without?
Definitely earpods.
There you go.
For our podcast.
Yes.
Carpool theology.
There you go. You're the first that said that, I think.
I'm OG podcast, y'all. So Relevant Podcast was my first podcast back in
Solid.
04.
Wow.
This is when you had to like plug in your iPhone to iTunes and then upload it to sync. So
wow, you had to do work.
you had to do a lot of work. Yes.
You had to really want it.
I've been in. I used to have a podcast. Sports File.
What?
No.
Yeah. I worked at Fresno Pacific in their athletic department. So I had a podcast back in 2007.
That's amazing.
I love
MBD.
that so much.
Man,
so much
2
today.
truths and a lie. Now I'm always going to get it right.
Yeah.
I love that.
I've learned so much.
Andrew, not only are you a great boss, but you are just such a good example to all of us of someone who is doing the things, but is also like pursuing Jesus in the midst, and just also trying to find like, how can I just be with him? So I think that's really important. And so I'm really grateful that, you were willing to get in the car with us today. Thank you.
Well, it's a gift, and thanks for allowing me to share a little of my heart and passion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we will link all of the things, y'all. You guys will link ENP. We're going to link all the ways you can get involved, the drive tour, all of it. So if you have any questions, if you want to see in Fresno as it is in heaven, look in our show notes.
Yes.
For real.
And hit Grace up. She'll give you a job.
What up?
And take me to coffee. I'm seriously, anybody's in town, love to have you join me for coffee.
Yay. Well, thank you. So encouraging.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
That's
Until
a
next
wrap.
time.
Bye.
You've been listening to Carpool Theology with Alex, Shanah, and Grace. Thanks for joining us. We're really glad you're here. New episode every other Thursday on all your favorite platforms. See you next time.